Good morning, good morning, good morning. We'll go ahead and get started. I think we're about 30 seconds, we're a minute early, but that's okay. Those that are coming on time will be late, I guess. But I'm glad that you're here today. We had a wonderful 9 a.m. service. If you were not here, let me encourage you to get the message online, and if you're not able to do that, you can request a CD. It was a very practical message. Our missionary, Brother Sanderlin, spoke, and it was he got us to engage our minds on perspective, on why missions and what missions is all about, and it was very great. With the exception of the part that he kept embarrassing me, but that's okay. But a couple of different announcements here this morning. First of all, last night we had a tremendous Christmas banquet for the adults. The teenagers have a Christmas party this coming Friday at 6 o'clock. So if you're a teenager, I would encourage you to come to that. If you have any questions, see Trevor or Sharon regarding that. This coming Saturday, normally there's a prayer breakfast, but there's not this Saturday. There is program rehearsal for the kids. I think that's from 10 to 12. And then, of course, Geneseo Christmas Walk always has their thing going on. We have a booth there. We're offering cider and hot cocoa for free, just to be a blessing, encouragement to the community. If you're interested in come out to say hi or to take a shift. We do need your help. If you have a 5-gallon igloo that we can use for that, we're just one or two shy. And so if you can bring that in and let me know, or Mike or Heather actually would be better, or Pam Petrie, or anybody else you want to know, that's fine. But we could use that. If you can get with us, we'd appreciate that. And then next Sunday is a different schedule. There's no 9 a.m. service, okay? We'll start at 10 for Sunday school. That's regular. And then the 11 o'clock service. So the children's program is next week, okay? So I'll bring a short message right afterwards. No amens. So I'm looking forward to that. The children have been practicing lately, and I'm looking forward to that presentation. Just to keep you updated, one of our missionaries, the Woodards, missionaries to Guyana, we've only been supporting them for a couple of years, but they're coming off of the field due to health issues that she has, and it was a hard decision on their part, but just to keep you apprised there. At the end of the service, we're getting ready to take an offering now. These handsome men are getting ready to take an offering. After the service is over, we'll take a second offering, and that's a benevolent offering. That goes to Aaron and Elizabeth Countryman. They just had a son, Joseph, who's only 1 pound, 7 ounces, and so they're going to be staying in Iowa City for the next couple of months, primarily just so they can be with their child. And so because of those added expenses, we want to be a blessing to them as a church. So whatever funds come in, the offering at the end will go directly towards them. This will be our regular offering. By the way, what's interesting, I found out something when I was in the hospital visiting the Countrymen's and seeing little Joseph, and I mean little Joseph. But let me see if I get this right. Aaron's middle name is Paul. Joseph's middle name is Titus. Their other son that was born last year, Cyrus, his middle name is Timothy. So there's Paul, Timothy, and Titus. Of course, in the Bible, Paul, anyway, I think it's neat. But anyway. All right, I think that's all. So I'm going to shut up here real quick. What's going to happen is we're going to have a word of prayer. We'll take the offering. Brother Sanderlin, our missionary to Cameroon, we've been supporting them for a while. Missionaries from time to time come back to the States to take care of business, as well as to report to churches, so we can know exactly what's going on. Although we get their letters, and you can always look at any missionaries' letters on our website. They're all posted, and you can always peruse through there. But it's another thing just to have them in the service to report, so we can rejoice of what God has been doing, because they can't share everything in a letter. So he'll come up here and speak just for a few moments, and then we'll watch a video right before the song service. So let's pray for the offering and for the service together. Father, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for who you are. Thank you for singing, that we get an instrument. But to my left, there's instruments, a piano and some other instruments they'll be playing. But Lord, you gave us all an instrument, a voice. And I pray that today we would use that instrument for your glory. And help us as we leave this place to use that instrument to share our faith with others, oh God. And you gave us that opportunity, that privilege to speak, and pray that you give us the boldness, the courage to do that. Thank you again for the Sanderlands being here, Lord. I know that they've been traveling just to even come here today. And I pray, God, that you would just continue to provide for them safety, but continue to work in their ministry back in Cameroon. Bless this offering now. And the offering to follow at the end of the service, and all the things that are going to take place between now and then. We love you so much. May you be glorified. May we be edified in Christ's name. Amen.
To everyone. My name is Sam Sanderland, missionary to Cameroon, and my wife is here with me, Abby, and we have our kids in the service, and my mom is here, and thank the Lord for the opportunity to be with you this morning. I am the nephew of Rick and Chris Peterson over there, and so we just enjoy coming back and touching base with all of you. I've known some of you for many years, and others of you are just getting to know you today. And so glad that each one of you is here this morning. In Sunday school, I had some coins, and we were talking about perspective, and one of them was a coin, and Brother Steger didn't know what it was till he got very close to the coin. And we were talking about being perspective, and honestly, the point of that was just to kind of show you need to be close to something before you can have the right perspective. If it was a coin from Cameroon, even if you're really close, you might not know what it is until you are in the country and able to spend it. Then you get a different perspective. And we're going to show you a video. I know some of you could never go to Africa, but hopefully this video will give you a little bit of a taste of Cameroon, a different perspective. And so look forward to showing that to you in just a minute. We've been in Cameroon since 2009 and started a few churches on the English-speaking part of Cameroon. We lived in the town of Ndap, 25,000 people, and started Believers Baptist Church in that city. And worked together, my family, with Pastor Chrysanthus and his family. He was a New Bible College graduate at the time, brought his family to our town. We started a church together. And from that church that we started, people were saved and baptized, and we had a Bible Institute. And we trained the people in that church to go out not only into our town, but at the same time to reach out into villages around us. And that church is still doing that today. And they're preaching the gospel and planting churches, and it's very dangerous for them. Right now there's a civil war going on in that area, and they're stopped and questioned by rebels on a regular basis, government officials as well, and there's just a great conflict there. So I would ask you on their behalf to pray for them. They would appreciate that you'd pray for their safety, yes, but they would also appreciate that you would pray for their boldness to keep doing what they're doing, and pray that God would provide for them. It's not always easy to grow their own food anymore. It's not easy just to have the basic needs satisfied at times. But those who have stayed with a purpose and a mission. That's where they're from, and they want to keep serving God where they're from. And so pray for the folks at Believers Baptist and Grace Baptist and some of the other churches and villages in the northwest part of Cameroon. A very dangerous place for them to be, and I would just appreciate your prayers for them at this time. We were there for about 7 years, and then the Lord moved us on for a furlough, which turned into an extended furlough for a lot of different reasons, and then COVID happened, and we finally got back to Cameroon, and we're on the French-speaking part of Cameroon now due to the civil unrest in the country. And so our family is learning French and ministering in the town of Bafoussam. So there are 10 regions in Cameroon, and 8 of them are French-speaking, 2 of them are English-speaking. And so pray for us as we are trying to master the French language and preaching the gospel in French eventually, Lord willing. I had a Bible Institute this last term, and had several young men preparing to be pastors. And they're actually both already serving in pastoral roles. And so I had the great joy of teaching them in their classes and going on outreach, not just in our town, but in all the villages around us, and using an airplane to go to faraway places, and using our car, and just whatever means is available. Had a great time going on outreach with the Cameroonians. And God is really raising up a number of qualified, gifted, and faithful men that are planting churches themselves. So what a privilege to be working right alongside these men, going out and preaching the gospel together, trying to reach new villages, trying to reach our region and then the regions beyond. And so I would appreciate your prayers for our next term. My brother is going to be joining us in the mission, going to be living in our town, and I look forward to working with him and his family. That will mean cousins for my kids, and that will be just a tremendous blessing for us and for them. And then seeing how God will use us together. They've already taken a year to learn French, and so they need to master it some more, but they're already doing a great job. And so pray for the 2 Sanderland families in Bafoussam, Cameroon, and then that God would lead us where he'd have us to serve, and plant churches together, preach the gospel together, teach Cameroonians together, and just be involved in the ministry together. I want to show you a video. This will be just kind of a summary of maybe the last 3 years or so that we were over there. Don't have much to show you from the first 7 years or so, but hopefully this video will give you just a little taste of all the variety of things that we do in Cameroon. And honestly, I just hope and pray that you would consider it an invitation to consider what God would have you to do for your life, whether you serve him here in Geneseo or Illinois or somewhere in the States, or just have your heart open to serving God in a foreign country where there's a great need. I'm not saying there's not a need in America, but keep your heart open to where God might have you serve, and be willing to go anywhere that God would direct you. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks, guys. Welcome to this short visit into the world of missions in Cameroon, West Africa, through the eyes of the Sanderland family. We are Sam, Abby, Elena, Elias, Chloe, and Caitlin. We want to take this opportunity to thank you for partnering with us as we serve God and others together. From 2009 to 2016, we worked in the English-speaking areas of the Northwest and Southwest. Working with nationals, we started Believers Baptist Church, which became autonomous in 2016. This church continues today to preach the gospel and plant other churches. They have recently started a church and primary school in an area much troubled by the civil unrest. However, the Lord is using them to see people saved and encourage the local population by teaching their children in this much-needed school. They are praying for the Lord to provide for the coming school year with increased funds to hire more teachers. After global restrictions in 2020 hindered our return to Cameroon, we were finally able to return in 2021. We moved to the regional capital of Bafoussam in the West region. Bafoussam has a population of near 500,000 with a pleasant climate built around the mountains. Bafoussam is primarily French-speaking, though many English speakers have moved there for safety and educational purposes. We spent the first 18 months focusing on learning more French, but ultimately settled into a mixed French and English-speaking ministry. We look forward to continuing our French studies throughout the coming years as we continue to reach into French-speaking areas with the gospel. Our family has enjoyed opportunities to serve in Bafoussam, and we are thankful for a good house, a lovable watchdog, and the opportunities to serve in and around town. The Lord even allowed Abby and the kids to have a wonderful homeschool teacher for a year. The aviation ministry also moved to Bafoussam at the regional airport. Tom Needham and I continue to use the airplanes to reach into regions beyond that are difficult to travel to due to lack of good roads. Most of the time, each hour flown saves a day of driving. Since 2021, the Lord has allowed Tom Needham and I to build a new hangar, see the arrival of a new airplane, and recover our old airplane that was left behind due to the civil unrest. Working with the government through all of these changes has been a real challenge, but we are thankful for the Lord's provision and help. Please pray for continued financial provision, for more missionary pilots or team members, and for our plans to reach the 4 regional capitals of the East, Adamawa, North, and Far North regions by use of the airplane. We could not easily manage without the help and support of our mission, Wings as Eagles, and our director, Terry Rushing. He comes over at least once a year and brings others with him to work, evangelize, and to be a blessing all around. He is a preacher, a pilot, mechanic, and a soul winner. That is a great combination for the field of Cameroon. Those he brings with him are always a blessing and leave with God having done some wonderful things in and through them. We have really enjoyed the teaching opportunities the last few years, both at Timothy Bible Institute, located in the national capital, as well as the newly established Baptist Bible Training Institute in our city of Bafoussam. The Lord has raised up many young men with a call to serve him. Pray for those who just graduated and are being ordained, as well as those still in the middle of their studies who are already busy serving in local churches each week. Please pray for our newest missionary co-workers who are scheduled to arrive in the fall of 2024. Chris and Laura Sanderlin and their family have been learning French in France for the last year, and they look forward to continue learning French in Cameroon and joining in the great opportunities to serve others in Bafoussam and around the country. There are so many other things going on in Cameroon, such as a growing radio ministry, Bible translation, and continuous outreaches and church planting efforts. Please consider if God might be calling you to Cameroon or to a foreign field. The opportunities to serve the Lord are before us all, and I pray that God will use you where he calls you. Thank you once again for partnering with us in our ministry in the field of Cameroon.
Today is Orchestra Sunday. We're going to be singing out of our hymn books this morning. If you'll take a hymn book and stand together, we'll start off by singing, I Have Decided to Follow Jesus, number 10. Number 10. Number 39. We'll sing the first, the second, and the last verse. Our last song this morning, His Way with Thee.
Copy of God's Word this morning, Daniel chapter 3, please. Daniel chapter 3. Even if you did not bring the Bible with you, there should be a copy in front of you. And if you need a copy, get up and grab one or something, okay? We're going to be looking at God's Word. It would help you to see it. It really would today. We are in this series, God's Guiding Principles. This is the 21st message in this series. Let me ask you a question. What is it called when you do the right thing when no one is looking? It's called integrity. But what is it called when you do the right thing when everyone is looking? It's courage. That's what I want to deal with today, is the courage principle. Every Christian, every person really, needs both of these qualities. Not only integrity, but courage. Sometimes the first one is actually easier to do than the second one, or to have than the second one. Is it easier to talk about Jesus while you're by yourself, or to talk about Jesus at work? You see what I mean? It's one thing to do something by yourself, but it's another thing to do it while people are looking. In chapter 1, the Hebrews had integrity. They chose not to eat of the king's meat. But in Daniel chapter 3, where we're going to be today, they're going to have courage. They're going to choose not to bow down to an idol when everyone else is doing it. And so this is a tremendous story here today. This week, I have prayed multiple times that our church would step up, stand up, and speak up, even if everyone else is watching. Daniel happens about 500 years before Christ, and it's the only Old Testament book that uses the word Messiah. Does anybody happen to know the only New Testament book that mentions Messiah? John. John is the only New Testament book that mentions Messiah. Daniel and Joseph are similar because they both interpret dreams. And there's in the Bible, there are 3 satanic attempts to bring the people together for unity's sake, all using false religion. One's in the book of Genesis, Tower of Babel. One's in the book of Revelation, the Antichrist is going to do it. And the other one's found in the book of Daniel, which is what we're going to read today. Well, you would think that since it's the book of Daniel, Daniel would be mentioned in every single chapter. But in the chapter we're at today, he's not even mentioned. 3 other dudes are mentioned: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Well, I want to know, why are these 3 guys mentioned? Nothing wrong with mentioning them, but why isn't Daniel mentioned? Well, to understand chapter 3, chapter 2 you need to know something about. Chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar, he's the Babylonian king. He has a dream. It was so clear and vivid, he wakes up startled, but he can't remember it. Have you ever been there? He just can't remember, like, man, I have no idea what it was. Man, it woke me up, though. Well, this guy was so bothered, he called all the soothsayers, the diviners, the astrologers, the magicians, the guys that are supposed to know things. He calls them together and guys, I had a dream. Tell me what it was. They said, okay, king, tell us what the dream was and we'll tell you what it meant. The king says, I don't know what it was. You tell me. The guy's going, king, nobody on this earth can do that. Nobody knows what you dreamed. How can we do that? What you're asking is, it's absurd. Can't we do that? And the king said, how dare you? You guys are supposed to know things. So he gets really mad at these guys, and he starts on this outraged theme to kill everybody. He said, I'm going to kill you all. You're worthless. Daniel hears about it, who he's been promoted. He hears about it and says, king, time out. Oh, by the way. Oh, no, let me just finish the story. Daniel says, king, time out. Don't kill everybody yet. let me pray about it. So Daniel goes to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they pray. During that night, God tells Daniel what the dream was and what it meant. So he goes to the king and he says, King, this is what you dreamed. You dreamed about a statue. He was made out of 4 different pieces. His head was gold. His middle section was silver. His lower middle section was bronze. And down below the feet were iron. And they represent the 4 kingdoms that are coming. The first one is you, king. It's the Babylonians. The middle one is the Medes and the Persians. They're going to beat you up a little bit later. And then Alexander the Great's going to come with Greece. And then Rome is going to come. Of course, Rome is when the New Testament takes place. It was Caesar. So Nebuchadnezzar goes, oh man, you the man, you the man. So he promotes Daniel, and Daniel goes, time out, time out. It was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that helped me pray to give you the answer. So the king promotes Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So you say, okay, thanks for that story, Pastor. That's chapter 2. Well, that's important because Daniel is promoted to an administrative position at a desk job back at the palace, where Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego are promoted kind of like regional managers. You say, how do you know this? We're in chapter 3. Look at the chapter 2, but the last verse, verse 49. Then Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel sat in the gate of the king. All right, so Daniel is not with the 3 dudes, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So that's why chapter 3 is only mentioning the 3 guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and not Daniel, because it takes place in the province of Babylon, which is where they are and not Daniel. So that's why Daniel's not even mentioned in chapter 3. All right, so if you're taking notes here today, first of all, the fancy monarch. The fancy monarch. Well, after Daniel tells King Nebuchadnezzar that he is the gold, the head, he gets so full of himself. He starts thinking, oh yeah, I'm something wonderful. The other guys are just brass and silver and iron, but I'm gold. So what does he do? He begins to build a statue of himself, and he makes it all out of gold, the entire thing. So we see, first of all, in verse number 1, the project. The project. I want you to notice how tall this thing is, how wide it is. Look at chapter 3, Daniel chapter 3, verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar, the king. Now let me stop there. What I find interesting, and I actually have it highlighted throughout my chapter, there's 2 phrases that are repeated, I think 8 times each, if I counted correctly. All right, have you ever noticed somebody to say something over and over again, and besides they repeat it, and besides that it's redundant? Do you see what I just did? It's the same thing. Well, over and over again it says Nebuchadnezzar, the king, Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar, the king. It's kind of like, okay, we get it. He's the king. But it also says that the king set it up. He's going to set this image up. And each of these phrases are used 8 different times, if I counted correctly. And it's almost saying the idea of doing this was totally the king's doing. It was his idea. He carried it through. It's on him. So again, let's go back to verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 80 cubits, the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. That's where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were promoted to, in the province of Babylon. So that's where it's at. So you say, okay, what's the big deal? Well, did you notice it's 80 cubits? Well, a score is 20. 80 would be 3 times 20, 60. 60 cubits. You're like, okay, we don't use cubits here in America, Pastor. All right. So in the Bible, they didn't have tape measures like we do now and how to measure things, so they used their hands. So for instance, the Bible uses the word span. The span is the distance between a thumb and a pinky. That's 6 inches. So if you wanted to find out the distance between the end of the pulpit and the mic, it would be about 14 inches. That's a span. It's two spans and some. And so that's a span. But a cubit is the tip of the finger to the elbow. It's 1.5 feet. So 60 or 60 cubits, here's 1 cubit, here's another cubit. So the pulpit's a little more than 2 cubits wide. Well, this thing was 60 cubits. That's 90 feet tall. That's about 3 buses. And then it says it's 6 cubits wide. A cubit, again, is 1.5 feet, so it's 9 feet wide. So here's probably 6, so maybe 9 feet right here. So it's this wide and 90 feet, and it's in a plane so people can see it from a distance, and they can point to it because King Nebuchadnezzar wants to be seen because he thinks he's all that in a bag of chips. So he makes this fancy project, but not only that, then we see the politicians. He calls all the leaders in the land. He says, guys, come out here. He's going to summon them all for this special dedication of his idol that looks like him, that pictures him. Look at verse number 2. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, sent to gather together the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar, the king, had set up. All right, so we see the project, we see the politicians, but then we see the proclamation. The king is going to, once he's got everybody together, he's going to proclaim to them. He says, guys, I'm going to give you a cue. Now, just a minute ago, we had a song service. And typically, the song leader gives us a cue when to begin. Like this. And so he's going to make a proclamation that says, guys, when you hear the orchestra play, then at that moment, you bow down. That's what you're going to do. You're going to bow down to this thing. You're going to bow and worship it. Well, look at verse number 4. Then a herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages. Now stop there. That's important where it says, O people, nations, and languages. Because it wasn't just a decree, a proclamation enforced only upon the Babylonians. The Jews were there. The Babylonians captured Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were the POWs, the prisoners of war. They were there. So everybody had to bow down to his image. It just wasn't the Babylonians. It just wasn't the Jews. Everybody had to bow down to it. Verse 5, that at what time you hear the sound of, he's going to mention all these instruments, the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, the dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. All right, so the project is the huge idol, 60 cubits, 90 by 9. And then the politicians, then he makes a proclamation, and then the penalty. The penalty. He makes it very clear. He says, you better bow or you're going to burn. That's the penalty. You better bend a knee at my idol because I'm so amazing, King Nebuchadnezzar says, that if you do, that's great, but if you don't, it's not going to be so great for you. In fact, I'm going to throw you into a fiery furnace. And everybody understood, he's telling the leaders here, spread the word. Look at verse number 6. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning, fiery furnace. Now, this was very clear. There was no gray area. There was no ambiguity. It wasn't unclear. Somebody said, could you explain that again? Didn't quite understand. Bow or burn, buddy. Bow or burn. You bow. If you don't, you burn. Good enough? For the Jew, this was big time. Babylonians, it wasn't a big deal at all because they're used to bowing down to several idols that they had. But for the Jew, it went against commandment number 1 and commandment number 2. The very first commandment that they have is, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Commandment number 2 is, thou shalt not make any graven images. So for them to bow down to King Nebuchadnezzar's 90 feet by 9 feet wide, it was a big deal. Now, most of us probably would go, what's the big deal? At least I survive. I'll bow on the outside, but I'm not bowing on the inside. Well, these Jews had not only integrity, but they're going to have courage here. They're saying, I'm not bending or bowing on the inside or the outside. I bow to my God. That's who I bow down. I'm not going to bow down to your God. So they're going to be forced with this decision. But there was certainly a penalty for not following the proclamation. So that's the fancy monarch. Then number 2, the faithful men. Now the story gets interesting. Well, we know what the king's dream was about this image. We know that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were promoted. We know Daniel was promoted, but he's off to the palace. And in the province of Babylon, where these guys are, the king builds this huge idol, and he makes a gathering of all the leaders. He makes a proclamation. You're going to bow down at the sound of the instruments. He says, if you do, that's great. If you don't, you burn. But now these 3 guys who are in the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are going to be forced with a decision. Do we bow or do we burn? Well, let's look at the threat here as we continue into this passage here. We see, first of all, the astrologer's report. I guarantee this week somebody's going to be watching you. If you have young children in your house, they're going to be watching mom and dad. They're going to be watching other older siblings. They're going to be watching you. Just like right now, most of you, are looking at me right now. I understand that every Sunday people are watching me. I get it. This week, I understand that people are going to be watching me. When I go to work, people are going to be watching me. When I go to the hospital, people are going to be watching. Well, people are going to be watching all of us. Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are going to have some people that are going to be watching them because they know that these guys are usually bowing down to their God. So they're watching to see if they're going to bow down to King Nebuchadnezzar's idol. Well, they don't. The music begins to play. These 3 guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do not bow down, and the astrologers, they go to King Nebuchadnezzar and say, tattletale, tattletale, I'm going to tell on them. I'm going to go to the king and tell. And so they report to the king. Look at verse number 8. Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. They spake and said to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Now skip down to verse 12. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. They said, they disrespect you, king. They disrespect your gods, and they disrespect your idol. What are you going to do about it? Well, the king's already made a proclamation publicly, bow or burn. So the king's going to get super upset. He's going to be irate. He says, how dare somebody go against me, my gods, and my idol? We see not only the astrologer's report, but the king's reasoning. The king has these 3 guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, to come before him. Now, what's interesting is he's going to reason with them. He says, guys, I've already told everybody, I'll burn you within the hour if you don't bow. But he takes time to get these guys here because he's already promoted them, and he gives them a second chance. He says, guys, maybe you didn't hear me to begin with. I'm going to make it very clear. Bow or burn. That's what he says. Look at verse number 13. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now, if ye be ready, that at what time you hear the sound of, and he mentions all of these instruments again, well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Well, that statement right there, it's almost like, guys, I don't care who your God is, he ain't going to deliver you from me. I'm so powerful, I'm so great. So he's got this attitude like, you better, I'm giving you a second chance, buddy, bow or burn. So now the guys have a decision to make. They already made one decision. They did not bow. That was a public decision. But now they're brought before the king. Now are they going to be wishy-washy and go, okay, our bad. We'll bow now. Well, we see not only the threat, but we see the testimony. the testimony. Watch the men's answer here. These next verses are so amazing to me. I love it, I love it, I love it. Look at verse 16 and 17. They talk about God's ability here. Verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, now the next two words I have underlined in my Bible, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. So he says, not only is our God able to deliver us from the furnace, but he's able to deliver us from you, O king. My God is able. Now, can I say this? One of the applications I want to get to, there's some of us that are going through some things in our life that are fiery furnaces, difficulty to handle, stressful situations, health concerns that we might have. I guarantee it's nothing compared to what these guys have gone through. And the God that was able then is the same God that is able today. The issue is we oftentimes want God to deliver us from the fire, but oftentimes God delivers us through the fire. And we have to go through that difficulty. And praise the Lord for his comfort and grace during those difficult times. But they speak of God's ability, but notice their integrity. Their integrity. Look at verse number 18. Now, they just said God is able to deliver us. Verse 18, but if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Boy, they're very clear. God is able to do it. By the way, it doesn't matter whether you are in financial straits. God is able to do it. Now, we just may not know if he's going to deliver us, but he is able to deliver us. If you've got a health issue, God is able. We just don't know if he's going to deliver us. You see the difference here. There's one thing knowing he has the ability to do it and trusting him. Whether he chooses to do it is a different issue. But they said, God is able to do this, O king. He's able to deliver us from the fiery furnace and to deliver from your hand. But if he chooses not to, I guarantee, king, we're not bowing down. Well, the king was mad before, but now he's livid. He's irate beyond expression. He's just like, I can't believe this. They did it publicly. Now they're doing it privately right in front of my face to defy me. So he's overwhelmed at this. We see not only the men's answer, but now we see the king's anger. Look at verse 19. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed. Now, every teenager in here has seen the form of your parents' visage change before you. At one moment, they're like, and the very next, they're either stunned or outraged. What are you doing? You idiot. Their countenance changed. So he gets mad. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. So normally what's the word for kiln? My mind went blank. Yeah, they burn bricks. But anyway, the furnace is built, and normally it's a certain heat, but they heated it 7 times more. I don't know what they did to throw it in there to make it more hotter than before, but nevertheless, it's hotter than before. In fact, the king is so mad, he's acting on a rash decision. The guys that are responsible for throwing Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fiery furnace, the heat is so bad, they're killed. They're burned up. Look at verse number 22. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Well, we see, I only have 3 points. We've already gone through 2. First of all was the fancy monarch. Secondly, the faithful men. And thirdly, the fourth man. The fourth man. What's happened so far is interesting, and I learn a lot from the guys who have not only courage but integrity and boldness to speak and take a stand for what they believe in. But what happens next is doctrinally wonderful. It's almost hilarious in one perspective. Well, all right, I'll try not to laugh. The king and everyone is there. This is a public event. Throw 3 guys into the furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The guys who are throwing them in, they die. They drop dead right then. And all of a sudden, the king takes a look inside the furnace. Hey, excuse me. Hey, did we throw in 3 guys over there? And they go, well, yeah, we were here, king. You were here. We threw in 3. Hey, there's 4 there, guys. There's 4. So that's exactly what happens. Look at verse 24. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonied or astonished, and rose up in haste and spake and said unto the counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Notice that they weren't just burning in the fire, 4, they were walking in the fire. Now it says the word walking. I wonder if they were skipping, I don't know. Maybe they took some hot dogs in there or something. I don't know, to roast or whatever. But they're having a good time, the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But there's a 4th guy, and the king is saying, I think he's the Son of God. And they're with them, protecting them from this flame. So that was the discovery. He discovered a 4th person in there. Well, then we see the deliverance. The king notices that the 3 guys aren't burned up. They're not toast. And so he says, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, come on out. You're the next contestant, And these 3 guys, even though there was a 4th guy in there protecting them, he calls the 3 guys out that he sent them in. And he calls them out and delivers them from the fire, like they actually needed his help, But verse 26, Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire, and now watch the public event. And the princes, the governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was a hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Years ago when we were young, my dad, some of you may not know, my mom was an alcoholic, so my dad raised us. But my dad worked at General Motors. He worked all the time. So when we were young, we had babysitters. But the moment my sister, got high school, she was our babysitter. My dad didn't want to fork out all the money. He was feeding 3 boys already. And so we wanted to put in a frozen pizza for dinner. My dad wasn't home. And so we didn't know how to light a stove. We were young. So all we knew is that sometimes there's fire coming out. So we pulled out the bottom drawer, and we stick the pizza in the bottom drawer. And we turned on the gas, but there was no flame. So my brother thought, let's put a match to it. Well, by the time he got up to grab the match, the gas had been going. And so he did this, and boom! It was a big explosion, and everything was fine. But boy, you should have seen for the next several days the hair on his head and even his eyebrows. And my dad knew exactly what had happened. And we got in trouble later because that was easy to see. But his hair was singed. And he did have a smell about him. Now, the other night when I watched the boys' basketball team, and they got done playing the first game and went to the concessions, they had a smell about them too. But anyway, can you imagine coming out of this fire, your clothes not being burned? You don't look burned. You don't smell burned. There must have been somebody goes up, the official sniffer, smelling. They don't smell burned. I mean, they're all amazed that there's this public event at the God who can deliver them, even keeping the smell of the smoke off of them. So lastly, we see the discovery, the deliverance, there's a decree. King Nebuchadnezzar, after seeing all of this, he makes a decree about the God who delivered these three guys. Look with me at verse number 29. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill. That just means doo-doo. Because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. I have that whole phrase underlined in my Bible. There is no other God that can deliver after this sort. They're amazed because their gods, who they bowed down, even the idol that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, couldn't have that power. And the God who delivered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, nobody can deliver like that God after that sort. So look, folks, I don't know what you're going through, what fiery furnace you're going through, but we need to have not only integrity, but we need to have courage. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had integrity. They did the right thing when no one was looking. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had courage. They did the right thing when everyone was looking, whether they would bow down to it. Here's what the courage principle states. Do the right thing because God is looking. Guys, on the internet, on your phone, when you think that no one else is looking and you're all alone, or when you're public, you're a teenager and you're at school and it's lunchtime. Do I bow my head? Everybody will be looking at me. Am I going to the restaurant today on a Sunday afternoon? If I bow my head, that'll be embarrassing. Everybody will know that I'm a Christian. Have some courage. Have integrity. Have courage. Why? Because whether you're alone or whether you're in public, God is looking. Every head bowed, every eye closed. God is looking right now while you're at church, whether you paid attention, whether you received the message that was given to you. God will see you when you go home. God will see you this week, public and private. Will you have integrity to do the right thing when no one is looking? Will you have courage when everybody else is looking at you? Will you do the right thing? Maybe there's some confession that needs to go on and say, God, I know I did some wrong things when I thought no one was looking, but you saw me. Please forgive me for those things. Or maybe, God, help me to have the right courage at work or at school or at the restaurant even today to do the right thing in public. With heads bowed and eyes closed, I always ask the same question on Sunday morning. No one's looking around, please. Respect that. Is there anybody that say, Pastor, would you please pray for me? Because if I were to die today, I actually don't know that I'd go to heaven. I hope so. I believe that there is a God, but I actually don't know that I'd go to heaven. Would you please pray for me, Pastor? Thank you for that. Thank you. A couple of hands went up. If you want to talk to me during the invitation, it would take courage. Or afterwards, that's fine. I'd be honored. Thrilled to talk to you so you can become a child of God. Talk to someone today. We're going to have a short invitation. Would you stand right now with heads bowed and eyes closed? And maybe you need to come forward and bend a knee and say, God, help me have integrity to do what's right when no one is looking. God, help me to have courage to do what's right when everyone else is looking. Just a short invitation. The music's going to begin playing here. You can make a decision where you're at or come forward. The God who is able to deliver them is the God who is able to deliver us now. No matter the problem that you're going through, He is able. Father, thank you for the Word of God. What's interesting is you describe in detail things about the smell of smoke. You describe in this holy book details about elements and what people perceived and how they felt. God, you must have thought these details, this information was important for us today. And I appreciate the example of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who not only had integrity but had courage. And I know people are going to be watching us this week at work, at school, at home, at restaurants. Help us to have not only integrity but courage, because you're always looking at us. Thank you for caring for us that much. I pray that you'd help now this day, this offering as we take it for Aaron and Elizabeth, as they are trying to provide for little Joseph and Cyrus. Bless them, and I pray that you'd help us this week to live for you. In Christ's name, amen. Would you be seated right now just quickly as the guys pass